Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night to you, wherever you may be. It is Thursday, the 28th of September already. How about that? The whole month's gone by, and this is what is this? This is the fourth show in the series. Welcome to the show. Yeah, 4 shows in, and it's autumn already. September's whizzed by, and I've been having nothing but fun. I hope you've had fun too. Now it's the time for the leaves to fall and for us all to be on our way, or something like that. In tonight's show, we'll be carrying on with the theme of, well, looking at that money power thing, because it touches on, well, just about every other topic, actually. We'll be looking at the connection between Abraham Lincoln and the chief cashier of the Bank of England in 1914. I knew you all woke up this morning thinking that's exactly what I need to hear today. And also the hidden treasure inside national treasuries. And it's not treasure as such. Welcome back. I'll be hoping to avoid the technical imbroglio and all that other nonsense that we had last week, which was a lot of fun. If you were here for last week, actually, it wasn't really a lot of fun. It was a bit irritating. I kind of got that way. But it turned out that Muggins here had actually set things up slightly wrong. I don't think I have done today, although, as I've said before, I don't seem to have enough eyeballs to check all these things all at the same time. So the current status, as far as I'm aware, is we are streaming out live on Rumble, on Paul English Live. That's the channel. I'm going to check that in a second or two. We're also streaming out at the same time on Odyssey, at the same channel, Paul English Live, or at Paul English over on Odyssey. So welcome there. And we're also being live simulcast on Speak Free Radio. Now, we used to have a sort of streaming player just for the audio on the website, but I've dropped that for now because it was just a bit too much for my poor little brain to deal with. So I thought we would just shunt that to one side, apart from which Rumble really is the main focus for me at the moment, just as it is for Russell Brand. I don't know if you know about him. I'm not a fan or anything. I'm not really going to go into that kind of stuff because I already have. I've just gone into it, haven't I? But so I'll check the channels. If anything's wrong, please don't try and send me any super alarming messages because I get distracted very easily. I'm rather, I'm not very good multitasker is the truth of it. And I think it's because I'm a bloke, see. We're kind of, we do chain tasks. We get them all set up in a line and we go bang, 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 like a domino effect. Whereas, stirring and cooking and putting things in the oven's not generally our forte. And I tend to conform to that stereotype, I'm afraid. So yeah, welcome to the show. Been encouraged actually by a few comments that have come in here, there and everywhere. Not so many, but you take what you see and how things turn up in your space. And, I guess I've been sort of hedging my bets to some degree verbally when I've been talking about the banking stuff here, but it seems to be striking more of a chord. And somebody wrote and said, it needs to be pounded away at. And I think it probably does. And, because I'm not aware of other people necessarily that are covering it to such a greater degree. I mean, we're all, well, I'm not. Actually, it's not true. We're all getting drawn into the drama of what is taking place in the world, you see, and we're easily distracted. Oh, I just got distracted then by a bird flying past the window. You see, we're very easily distracted and pulled off of the main chase. And just having done these first 2 or 3 shows and gone through the motions with everything and got back up to speed and started dusting off old books that I used to read and this, that, and the other, it's kind of whetted my appetite for more of this kind of material. And not just so that we have some kind of pedestrian history lesson wading through all these things and this happened and that happened. I'm trying to pick on things that are relevant to our situation now. It is useful, I think, to have a basic understanding of why we're in the mess that we're in. And it's not a mess that we have necessarily put ourselves into. We have been placed into it by forces more powerful than us, unfortunately. And we are kind of excluded, are we not, from the communication spaces where we could possibly, so we naively think, make a point, get them to readjust their thinking, think more nicely about the mass of people that they are lording it over. That's unlikely, by the way. I think that the people that are in charge, of course, have developed a habitual behavior patterns over the centuries. Nothing that you and I are likely to ever be able to say to them would dissuade them from the fact that they are the people in charge. They've always been the people in charge, and they intend to remain the people in charge. That's really what they're looking for. So, we have our job cut out for us in terms of thinking, well, where are we going to address the communication? What is it that we really want to do? I want to talk to you about banking. I've got some current stories as well about families and this, that, and the other. So I'm going to keep coming back to the bank as a main thread because, as I've said really on some of the recent shows, sounds as I've done loads, over the first couple or so, most of our problems, nearly all of them, stem from that. And I'm just repeating again, the chances of us making any effect to anything if we don't change the central bank are less than zero. And of course, most people are not even aware that this is a topic you can discuss. And you have to put it aside after a while because you realize that great minds have come at this, have sussed out what the problem is, and still nothing has happened. We have to bear this in mind. Just knowing things, at least I have to bear in mind. I sometimes get carried away. I think, I know this stuff. Do you ever get like that? I've just found out this piece of information. It's obviously true. I'll tell it to everybody and we're going to set the world on fire. And then nobody really responds very well to you. There was an Englishman, there's several Englishmen, but there was one. In fact, somebody mentioned it in a comment to me somewhere. It might have been on the Telegram group or somewhere, about with an unfortunate surname, Sir Frederick Soddy. But Soddy used to spend most of his time working with Rutherford, splitting atoms. They always larking about, splitting atoms. I think this is late 1910s, early 1920s. Anyway, he got a bit bored with that at some point. He must have done. And he wrote this book about banking, central banking, which really lays it all out. It's a very difficult book to read. So difficult, I didn't bother reading it. I remember at the time, but I've got it somewhere in my PDF collection. But it's rather tortuous language, I thought, at the time. There are more elegant ways of getting the points across. But I mention him purely to, effectively let you know that there are some very, very bright people have looked at this. And they all come up, the really bright ones, if they're left alone, with pretty much the same conclusion, which is that if you have private interests running a central bank in the manner that they run it, you've got a massive problem. And that massive problem has manifested itself certainly since 1694. I just pick that as the modern era of central banking. This stuff goes all the way back to 600 and 700 BC in Babylon, when interest was dreamt up or came down from some demon or something like that. And the whole leveling of interest and usury began. This practice is a mechanism by which ever more purchasing power is inexorably put into ever fewer hands. And you will probably, if you're listening to this, you're probably not some of those hands, I expect. I'm not either. And we find ourselves getting caught up in mammonism, the worship of mammon, even though I guess we don't think of ourselves as that, but we've been inducted into it, into the mammon thing, because there's probably not a week goes by without you personally having to think about a bill that's coming up in your life and all this kind of stuff. So Soddy and others, Major Douglas I've mentioned. There was Silvio Gesell. There's the man with a very long name who was putting Gesell's things into practice in Virgil, Unter Guggenberger. Look, I remembered. It's a long name. You'd think that maybe a McDonald's could come out with an Unter Guggenberger. I don't know what would be in it, but I wouldn't go anyway. McDonald's is not even food, is it, these days? Am I going to get... Maybe the McDonald's police will be knocking on my door soon saying, you can't talk like that. You never know. New police departments are springing up all the time, aren't they? So these people have thought it through. Recently, here in the UK, about 20 years ago, there's a chap called Michael Robotham. And this, if you're sort of familiar with this topic, you'll be aware of his name. I've got it in my hand here. A book called The Grip of Death, a study of modern money, debt, slavery, and destructive economics. It's not the most exciting sort of topic, is it? If you think about how people respond to books. Ooh, I want to know about that. And yet, every ruinous thing that's happening to us now could not have happened unless something within the central banking scam system had allowed it, enabled it, supported it, augmented it, brought it to fruition. Why is it, that there's always sufficient money for war and bombs, but not enough money to house the homeless veterans from our army, from American armies who are sleeping rough on the streets? What is that all about? Well, it's indicative of an attitude that sits there at the top that is at war with us, I would suggest. It's basically at war. It's a maturing attitude. It's matured over a long period of time. And the chances of us being able to sort of jump that gap are, well, certainly by talking to them, as I was saying earlier, probably less than zero. So I've been giving a lot of these things thought again. I used to give them huge amounts of thought 15 and 20 years ago. And then my thinking developed into how do we transmit this information to the man in the pub? And of course you can't now in England because there aren't any pubs left. Well, that's not strictly true, but there's been a kind of undermining of pubs. They've turned into very tame spaces. Certainly the ones here where I live in this tiny little seaside town. It's relatively tiny. It's about 120,000 people, I think, live here, maybe a few more. But it's relatively small. And many of the pubs, of course, have become eateries and things like this, which are great, but they're not kind of what I remember growing up in Leeds when I was a lad in the 70s. With jukeboxes and pool tables. I know there's still pubs like that, and probably there are still in London, and pub bands and all. It was a culture unto itself. And Belloc said, if you lose your pubs, you'll lose England. And he's kind of right to a degree. Kind of right. So reaching the man in the pub becomes a little bit more difficult when there aren't any pubs left to reach him in. But, it's a figure of speech. Can we come up with something that's plain and simple to do things? To make this come about. So I mentioned earlier a connection in part it's not really a connection. It's just me being silly. But the line between a speech that Abraham Lincoln made or a statement that he made, I've got it here. I've been looking for it actually online to get a PDF version so I could read it off the screen today. Was unable to find one. I'm no slouch with search engines. Honest, believe you me. They may have been sort of taking these things off. And I might read the whole of this. You didn't think this was going to happen, did you? Neither did I. But let me just tell you what it is. It's important because it's really indicative of what the actual problem is. This doesn't mean I'm a fan of Lincoln. Everybody's a kind of ambivalent character. They've got good bits and bad bits. And Lincoln conforms to that just as fully as any other sort of major political figure. This is from Senate Document 23, page 91, written in 1865, and laid down, I think, just a matter of weeks before he was killed. Now, if you're not familiar with what the greenback is, which is a currency that he issued to avoid paying usury to bankers that were in his rear. I know that's a euphemism, but he did talk about that. He said, I have two enemies, those in front of me, the army, the Southern Confederacy that he was facing, and the bankers behind him. And he said, of the two, the ones that are behind are the more deadly. And he was right. So anyway, he wrote this thing called Monetary Policy, 1865. And this is, I first came across this in The Grip of Death by Michael Robotham some 25 years ago. It was published about 1998. And I want to read it to you. Let's see if it's not too long. It's one page of a good-sized paperback. Let's see if I can read this. It says, this is Lincoln writing. Money is the creature of law, and the creation of the original issue of money should be maintained as the exclusive monopoly of national government. Money possess no value to the state other than that gives to it by circulation. Capital has its proper place and is entitled to every protection. The wages of men should be recognized in the structure of and in the social order as more important than the wages of money. No duty is more imperative for the government than the duty it owes the people to furnish them with a sound and uniform currency, and of regulating the circulation of the medium of exchange so that labour will be protected from a vicious currency and commerce will be facilitated by cheap and safe exchanges. I'm not going to read it all out because it's more of that. It's not very long, but I'm not going to read it all out because we'll just get a little bit stuck in a kind of lecture thing. Let me just go to the last paragraph. He says this, because this is the summary of the last two. He says, government, possessing the power to create and issue currency and credit as money, and then the right to withdraw both currency and credit from circulation by taxation and otherwise, need not and should not borrow capital at interest as a means of financing governmental work and public enterprise. The government should create, issue and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest creative opportunity. By the adoption of these principles, the long-felt want for a uniform medium will be satisfied. The taxpayers will be saved immense sums of money and interest, discounts and exchanges. The financing of all public enterprises, the maintenance of stable government and ordered progress, and the conduct of the treasury will become matters of practical administration. The people can and will be furnished with a currency as safe as their own government. Money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity. Democracy will rise superior to the money power. Lincoln, 1865, Senate Document 23, page 91. Democracy will rise superior to the money power. This is Abraham Lincoln, then the President of the United States, and he couldn't pull it off because a few weeks later, he was killed. So Lincoln knew, and Lincoln's not alone. Many people involved, the intelligent people that used to occupy government, I don't think we can say necessarily the same thing of the crews that we are burdened with today, because they are all creatures of the central money power. The banking power places them into these positions to make them supine and obedient to the instructions and order set of the central bank. The bankers, the politicians of today are completely ignorant of this. Now, when you take into account what can be achieved through this sort of money, you realize that the entire game of life that you've been playing is a complete crock. I realized this back in the 90s when it was taught to me. I went, oh dear, there's no point me trying to do things. Now, that's not actually true because you've got to survive and you have been inducted into this mammonistic condition where you are compelled to find money. The complications of this are absolutely ridiculous. Why is it that a small group of a private group of individuals are able to dictate the politics of the entire nation by controlling the government, by getting the government to borrow money off of them at interest, money which they create out of thin air? People are appalled by this idea of creating money out of thin air. I'm not. What are you going to create out of? You might as well. It's a creature of the law. It doesn't appall me. What appalls me is that you and I are not involved. We're the ones that pay for their mistakes. That's how they've designed it. We don't know how life really ought to be, any of us, because all of us have been born into and lived under and are enduring to this very moment a banking system that is designed to keep you down. And its power reaches into every single area of life, all the most important ones. Once the power of coining the coin, as it were, of making the coin and receiving seigniorage. This is a fee you get for actually literally making the coins. It used to be the prerogative of our king. I know you can argue, say, well, he was never really our king. He was more interested in other things. Okay, fair enough. But still, there it was laid down. Once that power has been transferred into private hands, the history books show that we've been in a lot of trouble. Since the advent of the Bank of England in 1694, this country, Britain, has been at war practically every year, bar 5, since that date to this. What's that all about? Well, what it's all about is using strong-arm tactics as like debt collectors around the world and to seize assets and to keep this scam going. That's what it's all about. And although there will be very strong economic elements to the fighting of what is referred to as the US Civil War, that conflict there, the banking is major. There is I've forgotten the author actually. I should have brought it in. I've got it on my bookshelf elsewhere. But it's pivotal. I'm not that up on the US Civil War or the War of Northern Aggression, if you're a Southerner, or the War of Southern Aggression, I guess, if you're a Northerner. I'll still have your loyalties there. Whatever it is, the country was divided intentionally and brought it to a position where it could be subdued more fully. And that's exactly what happened. We say, oh, that's dreadful. Well, it happened here in England earlier than that. It happened during the English Civil War. It's the same principle at play. It happened to the French during the French Revolution. Same thing. It happened to the Russians during the Russian Revolution. It happened to the Germans during the Weimar Republic and that long war from 1914 to 1945. The primary driving force of these conflicts and the slaughter of so many of our best men over the past few hundred years has been the bank. Specifically, that the bank is not controlled by the government. Now, the arguments from bankers go, well, you can't trust the government with the bank. And my response is, it's none of your damn business, is it? I accept that the boobs that we have in government circles these days, you would be very worried, you would think, if they were in charge of these things. But that, I would also say that that's part of the maturing of the disease. These people have been groomed so that we get mediocrities everywhere. They're mediocre. I'm not trying to be nasty, but they are. They're nothing. Here I am, just me, I'm not alone in this, imparting information that practically everybody in Western Christian nations needs to know, should be taught this at school, right, so that we could put it right. The vast majority of our MPs in this country, we've got 600 and odd of the buggers running around, they haven't a clue about this. And you see, the other knock-on effect, or another aspect of it is this. If we furnish the correct amount of money into circulation without interest and without it being a debt, we're simply providing the tokens to service the commercial exchanges between us, which is what Major C.H. Douglas was talking about when he discovered that productivity was everywhere, but nothing was getting done because people couldn't exchange things because they didn't have any tokens called money. You begin to see what a madness this is. It is a madness. Now, how is it held in place? I keep thinking about this because you think, well, if you could find out the tendrils, the connective glue between all these different spaces that are holding it together, maybe we could look at how we could sever those connections. And we have to look at the history of it to find out how they've come about. It's down to greed. It's down to power. And it's down to whose will predominate. And under those circumstances, it becomes not acceptable, but understandable why we've ended up in this position. The education system, of course, is designed to keep you, me, and everybody else, and Tom, Dick, and Harry, ignorant of these things. The topic never comes up. I did economics at school for a couple of years. And I don't think we spent any time at all on money or banking. It was all about, supply and demand and marginal utility and all these other things. I came to think of economics as a joke, really. It's a bailing wire profession. What's the point of doing it at all? People get Nobel Prizes for coming up with all these things and everything, but it's all mad because it's basically awards for coming up with the best Band-Aid for a system that's fundamentally broke right at the very beginning, intentionally to be this way. So by having, intellectuals approach it and fix it, and they do to a degree for a short period of time and with marvelous things and this, that, and the other, and we're all panicking about it. This is going to happen. The markets are going to crash. It's like a big bogus, to me, a big bogus event. That is, the substance of it is not genuine. It's manufactured. It's a created drama. It has real impact in the world. I'm not dismissing that. It absolutely has real impact in the world. That's why they do it. So one of my little goals for a long time, if you ask me, what would you like in life? That kind of thing. What would you like? What would make you happy? Well, it would be to see what it was like to live with my kith and kin under a financial system. There's more than that, because finances, after a while, it just drives you crazy. But where we had a financial system that we owned. One of the little taglines I put onto this show is, and I think I mentioned it at the start, is the hidden treasure in the treasury. Because we have a UK treasury, you see, and the US have a treasury, and maybe the French have a French treasury. The financial money box, for want of a better phrase, it's not that, but of the government. What's the hidden treasure that's in it? The hidden treasure is that if that were the sole issuer and furnisher of money, as Lincoln addressed, as was addressed in certain events during the 20th century, which we'll come to shortly, one of them, then that's the real treasure of the treasury, is that it should be the exclusive supplier under law of tokens, which we call money. It would change life, it seems to me, in such a way that we probably can't even anticipate it, because we have been trained. You're just getting my speculations on this, right? But I think you'll find that many of them sort of ring true. We're trained like hamsters in a wheel to run faster and faster, to serve an economy which has to be served because the money it uses is interest-bearing debt money, which has to expand all the time. You've got this bizarre aspect as well, another bizarre aspect of it, which is this. When a bank issues a loan, which it creates out of nothing and puts interest on the top of it, it swells the money supply on their books. It just increased. Their assets go up. Your debt back to them of £1,000, $1,000, €1,000, whatever it may be, goes on their books as an asset. When you pay the loan off, the asset disappears. Their asset base is reduced. They actually are incentivized as a profit-making service industry. There's a bit more than that, of course. I'm being kind. To never have you pay the debt off. Not because they say so, but they're engineered that way. So what this means is that the actual goal of a bank is to keep as many of its clients in debt for as long as possible as it possibly can. Its goal is to keep its customers in debt with overdrafts, with loans, with this stuff. That's his aim. If it doesn't do that, he goes under. Is that cack-handed or what? It's good if you're talking about the banking industry, but I'm kind of talking about life. So doesn't it seem obvious that the banking industry, that the banking structure is anti-life in its current form? It is. It is anti-life. It's anti-life also in the most hellish way, because it's behind all the wars that we have to endure, or our forefathers have endured, have had to be put through meat grinders for, and have died, regrettably and awfully, for fruitless reasons, for nothing other than to deepen the power and the grip that the bankers have upon all of the organization of the nation, which is what's happened. I heard someone say, who's the most powerful, the government or the bank? If you're asking that question, you're obviously, you've got a bit of background reading to do. It's obvious when you look at it. Why is it that you can't find anything out about the bank? Why do you have to really work at it? Like I was saying today, I was online looking for that speech from Lincoln. Now, maybe someone's going to sort of bomb a message through on Rumble or something like that. I don't know. But I couldn't find it anywhere online, and I wanted to read it off the screen. That's why I kind of jumped around a bit, because I've got a pokey little light. Actually, I've got a candle. Yeah, let's lie. I've got a candle, and I'm in my threadbare things like Scrooge, and this candle's flickering over these pages on this autumnal evening here in the UK. And I was reading slowly from the book. That's what we were doing. So now there was a page I wanted to tell you what. While I'm just bumbling around here, let me just go and have a look. What's going on here? I am streaming, I think, aren't I? Yeah, I can see a lot of chat. Fantastic. There we go. Hang on. Let me just ling around here. Oops. Just go and have a look. There you go. I've got echo coming back at myself. Fab. So I'm really spending most of my time looking at the Rumble thing, but I'll get over and have a look at Odyssey as well. So, let's have a look here. I'm just going to pick up on the very last comment. So please forgive me, all those of you who've written things. I'll try and bomb up and down this. You know what I need to do? I need to just increase. There we go. I can read it with my ancient eyes. Paul, could someone create their own bank? Says Ding Hao. Yeah. Could they? Let's talk about that. It's really my theme for tonight, actually. I might not talk about it right this very second, but I'm going to come back to it, because people have. What has happened when they've done that? In other words, when we say create our own bank, what we're talking about is a financial system outside of the clutches of the incumbent power holders. They do not like that. Honest. They really, really do not like it. When I ended up in court 25 years ago, sort of looking at all this stuff, not knowing my head from my rear end, I did have very strong experiences, as one would, apart from the anxiety of not knowing quite what was going to happen to me, because I was thick as two short planks with regards to all of these legal procedures. Then I ended up becoming sort of, well, very sensitive to what was going on. Sorry, I just got distracted again. I've got to stop reading things. How do you do that? How do you read and talk at the same time? Apologies for that. I just had this sense that something was very, very bad about where I was. It wasn't even what I'd done. There was something very heavy about it. Maybe it's just me. And I felt sort of as if what we'd been doing was going right to the very heart of their sensitivities about where the power lie. I didn't know it fully in terms of being able to make an intellectual argument about it. I didn't know that. That came later. I mean, the trouble that was happening to me, Michael Rowbotham's book came out in the late 90s, which was exactly the same time when I was in a lot of doo-doo. So I began to read more and more of these things. There's also a lot of things on Usenet groups and stuff like that with people coming through. And I'd had this personal education from this individual who took me way beyond even all this stuff, in terms of showing me, well, just what they actually do to manipulate money supplies and who the privileged lot are. And guess what? It's not you. So if you move in the direction of saying we're going to form our own bank, they'll kill you. I think there's a very good chance that that's what they'll want to do, because you're going for the very heart of their machine. It's a bit like, because I'm looking at this autumnal picture here, and it makes me think of, I don't know, reading books in the autumn. I always thought it was the best time of year to read stuff. And one of the books I used to read when I was young was Lord of the Rings, as you do. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but Frodo and Sam having to get rid of that ring, that's the challenge. That's kind of what we've got to do. We've got to get rid of the very thing that we've been made dependent upon, a bit like drug addicts. We're addicted to mammon. We didn't ask to be. We weren't even conscious that we'd become that way, but we have, because everybody that you live with is quite happy to move the mammon tokens, the money, around, because they have to. I have to. You have to. Right? That's the actual on-the-ground pragmatics as they stand today. A thought for you with regards to forming a bank. Forming an operating bank, I think, is not too sensible. I wouldn't see it as a sensible option, frankly. I think that would come later. What I think is actually needed is a communications platform on which to attract large numbers of people with a very simple understanding of what needs to be achieved and what needs to be done and the benefits that would come to you. the benefits that would come to you, which are, even if they're only a tenth of what I think they are, they would dwarf what we're actually having to endure right now. Seriously, they would absolutely dwarf it. I'm going to play you a clip, and then I'm going to tell you who said it. Where is this? Where have I put this? There we go. So this is a clip. I mentioned earlier on about the Bradbury pound, about J.B. Bradbury, who was the chief cashier of the Bank of England about 100 years ago, a bit longer than that. Some of us, of course, were still handling notes. I was, when I was a wee lad, in the 60s and the 70s, with his signature still on it. Chief Cashier J.B. Bradbury. You may be long enough in the tooth to remember those as well. They had to sign off on all the notes. Of course, they're all printed up, but that was it. Here is an interview with a gentleman called Justin Walker. This is about 6 minutes long. Get your lug-holes round this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Okay, it's Wednesday, March the 19th. Budget day.
Oh, hang on. You know what? Let me just stop that. I do this all the time. I keep putting things on. There we go. Let me just check my my sound and volume levels. There we go. You weren't going to get that because I'd... Note to self, make sure there's some volume when you play a clip. Here we go.
Okay, it's Wednesday, March the 19th, Budget day. We're outside Parliament, and I'm here with Justin Walker, who is the campaign director and just about everything else to do with the Bradbury pound. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Sonia.
Thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's very exciting. We're here in the lair, if you like, of the criminal bankers and the politicians who have sold their souls to the criminal bankers. And we know they are criminal bankers because they can create money out of thin air, charge interest, and when they transfer that nothingness across to the Treasury, we, the taxpayers, have to find £50 billion a year to pay the interest on something that never existed in the first place.
Indeed.
But the good news is we're here because exactly 100 years ago, in that Palace of Westminster, they passed a rapid act through Parliament authorising the Treasury to issue debt-free and interest-free money based on the wealth of a nation to pay for the war and to prevent a run on the banks. In other words, the principle is that any sovereign nation in the world can issue its own debt-free and interest-free money based on the wealth of its nation through its treasury, not its central bank, through its treasury.
Now that sounds wonderfully simplistic.
It is.
And anybody listening to this would say there has to be a catch.
There's no catch at all. Absolutely none at all.
So why wouldn't they already be doing that then if it's interest-free?
Because the political parties are designed so the bankers can control whichever side of the party has been, whichever party has been elected to Parliament. That is how the system is done. Now, you say, there must surely be some sort of, there must be something wrong with this idea. You can't have got the solution. Well, we have. Because a government should regulate the cash flow into society in other words, to give the liquidity for a successful, booming, industrious and happy economy. In other words, this country is worth something in the region of £24 trillion, Office of National Statistics. Now that means they can draw from that, they can draw interest-free, debt-free money to pay for the infrastructure, to pay for the vulnerable in our society, to look after to secure our defences so that our sovereignty is protected. In other words, our country could be industrious, it could be happy. There's absolutely no reason at all. Why can't they do this?
Given that, well, it's an interesting question. Why can't they? I think It's more of a willingness not to.
Yeah.
But given that, so presumably you also believe that the whole idea of austerity is a nonsense.
It is a total nonsense.
Why? Why would they have created such an idea?
Because it's all about control. The more people are in debt, you become debt slaves to the system. They've developed this system where all of us have given away our individual sovereignty and our national sovereignty to unelected, unaccountable people. If I said to you the Bank for International Settlements, I will tell you now that 99%, probably more than that, of the people of this country have never heard of the Bank for International Settlements. The Bank for International Settlements is the central bank where the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve and the other central banks in the world go to take their instructions, they control the money supply of the entire world. And it's all done by creating debt. It's all done by creating money out of thin air and then charging interest and plunging nations, communities and families into unlawful debt. And I emphasize the word unlawful, because what's coming is a tidal wave that's going to sweep these idiots out of office.
So you're saying that they are all complicit?
They are all complicit, with the exception of there's 5 brave MPs who've actually signed an early day motion, Labour MPs, to actually restore the Bradbury Pound.
But surely they are very limited on what they can actually do, because you're talking about at this moment in time 5 MPs as opposed to 500 plus.
They've only got to stand up and ask the right questions.
Right.
Look at me spouting, I'm a nobody. Out here, a nobody. But if I was spouting those questions in there, them there, the BBC, Sky and all the others who are refusing to take any of this seriously,
yes,
they would have to listen.
Obviously, what you're talking about is you're talking about a few benefiting,
yes,
aren't you?
Yes.
Can we put a name, a face, a direction to these people who are apparently benefiting from the lie that you say is an absolute lie about our debt?
I think you just go into the City of London. Ask yourself about the City of London. Now, if I said to you that the City of London had their representative sitting alongside our MPs, unelected, unaccountable, only accountable to the City of London, the financiers in the City of London, you'd say, well, that can't be true. But since 1570, there has been an office called the Remembrancer. And the Remembrancer looks after the interests of the City of London and basically acts as sort of like a party whip. Make sure the MPs do not say and do things which might endanger the City of London. Now, nobody knows about the Remembrancer. It's there if you know where to look. But people are too, unfortunately, dumbed down, worrying about their football teams, worrying about who's won what programme on Saturday night and all the other stuff, because by day they're chasing their tails, trying to avoid going into debt, because people are basically becoming debt slaves. And people are not, if you like, haven't got the time to look what is really be happening.
Sure, we're on the hamster wheel. How can people get involved and back your campaign?
Right, go to the ukcolumn.org on site, UK Column. Click on the Bradbury logo, this wonderful logo that was done by one of our people, and you will find all the places to go, what to do, leaflets to download. More and more is going to happen. I mean, today, for instance, just coming today, we were in a taxi, and the taxi driver was right on board with us.
Right.
Absolutely on board.
Each one teach one.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I just want people, it's so simple. I am not an economist. I want to emphasize this now. I am a thicko. There's nothing clever about me, all right? If somebody had said to me 3 years ago, Justin, you'll be standing in front of cameras telling people about money supply, I'd have laughed. But even I can understand it. If I can understand it, anybody here today can understand it as well.
Right.
How about that? That's Justin Walker. And he knows a thing or two about the Bradbury Pound. I'm going to read out some things that he's written. And the Bradbury Pound operates in pretty much the same way as Lincoln was describing. Now, if we had, if we had an accountable, actually, before I just go into this, I've seen a comment that there's some problem with the sound. Is that still happening? If you could just type something in the Rumble chat, are we still getting popping in and out? It's very difficult for me to know exactly why. We're only going to 3 places, unless someone's decided to interfere with the stream a little bit, which is a bit tiresome. So I'll just look for a comment. If it's, I saw someone had written that the sound was dropping out, like popping in and out every 3 seconds. So if it's still doing that, would you let me know? Maybe I would disconnect Rumble for some reason. Not Rumble, Odyssey. There's no real reason why it should do that. Anyway, okay. At least I'm slightly aware of the technical hiccups that we're having as we bumble along. Let's go back to what was just being spoken about there. So that's the scale of it. Everything that we're enduring now, the COVID nonsense, the social engineering, the importation of migrants against our will, which wherever you are, the ruination of our culture. The sound is fine. Thanks, Drakey Lakey. Thank you very much. That's great. So we've got a solid sound. All of these things that are interfering with our life, they would not be possible without the bank being privately controlled. It's such a power that really all the wars are fought over this. They're fought internally in halls and in cabinet meetings and other meetings. Audio gaps are getting worse. I don't know what to say. It must be, that's only one person. That's Warren App Arthur 503-57. It's a great username. I even read it out. If they're solid for some people and not solid for you, then I could only assume that it's probably something to do with your internet connection. But, that's always a good pass off, isn't it? Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anything from anywhere else. So, I'm just going to carry on. If everybody says, we can't hear you, it's all gaps, then we'll stop. Well, I won't really. I'm just going to have to bumble on anyway, aren't I? Which we will. Now, where were we? Oh, yeah. So, the private bankers have mustered campaigns by controlling the press to keep the populace alarmed at the thought that the government should manage the currency of the nation. But if we think about it, and I'm going to be naive now, right? Okay. If we think about it in simple terms from the start, we have a situation whereby we as a people, whichever we you identify with or are a part of, whether you are an Englishman or a Scotsman or an American or a Canadian, we are supposedly forming governments to represent us. This is how it's supposed to go, right? Now, given that what Lincoln wrote is correct, that the coining of the money is the greatest power you can give. It's the greatest, right? There's no power greater than that, because with that power, you can decide where the energy of the nation is to be placed. You can decide that some of it must be placed in terms of a military capability to defend your nation, particularly if it becomes ridiculously prosperous, which it will under a currency system like this. And it will be perceived by the inhabitants of other countries that England has got it right. Oh, how I wish. And that will cause jealousy and envy, or even admiration, all sorts of things in these other populations, which their leaders will find not very good. They won't like that. Pretty soon, if you don't watch it, you're going to have people waging war on you because you're showing the rest of them up. You're showing the rest of them up because you're doing it straight. And much of the power club of the great merchants of the earth, this great banking money power, and those that are involved in government, they've formed a union, and it works for them. It works for them to be in control, and it also works for them to manipulate the press to make you think that life is a certain way. I mean, they're continually scaring you about the next economic crisis. This is going to go on loads, and we never know when it's going to happen, because it'll happen when they decide it's going to happen, because it's just simply manufactured. This means we don't really know the price of anything much now, do we? And if you are going to sit down and read economic reports, good luck. I wouldn't even waste my breath. It's not that they're not going to affect you, but you can't affect it back. It fills your head with things and drama that occupies your time, whereas in fact, what our time needs to be occupied with is furnishing ourselves with a durable, honest, lawful money system, which has been designed and put into place quite a few times. Now, in certain circles, of course, it's not good to say positive things about Germany and National Socialism in the 1930s. But when it comes to their economy, even though there is certain confusions and more than just one element going on, yes, they did receive investment from America and all sorts of other places. The principle at play galvanized that nation out of the mire in 1933, so that within 4 years, the 6.5–7 million men that were unemployed at the start of that period, nearly 5.5 million were back at work. Now, there are arguments to and fro saying, well, they were set up to do it. Yeah, they probably were. There's all sorts of things going on. It's not just a simple, I wish it were a simple straight story. But the element is pretty strong there. I've often thought that, if you're running the banking scam, you don't want that, do you? You don't really want that. It's not very good. Your other clients are going to get a bit cross. They're going to go, oh, we've seen that Germany are doing this, and we think we'll have a go. We're going to put Lincoln's greenback policy into play. And you may have heard of the word greenback, which of course is used or has been used. I think it's probably fallen out of use recently, but was used as a term to describe the US dollar, which it isn't. The US dollar is a Federal Reserve note, whereas the greenback was a note issued by the power of government through the Treasury on Lincoln's watch to effectively service the commercial exchanges needed to keep his military operations going, or the military operations of his generals. That was a key part of it. So greenbacks were known and as viable, solid things. They completely remove the whole requirement for a usury money lending business. You don't need a usurious loans business. You don't need it. If you don't get the actual token designed right, and it's designed intentionally wrong to transfer power into the hands of these people all the time, you end up living in the hectic, stressful, dramatic civilization, so-called, that we live in. And of course, you tend to not perceive it when you're young. You're just born into it like fish are born into water. You don't notice it. And it doesn't stop the requirement for you to work hard and be industrious and creative. In fact, we want to be that quite naturally. We like doing that. It's how we earn our own self-respect, is what we're trying to do, I suggest. We're trying to get to grips with conducting a decent life. But this banking system is chewing you, me, and everybody else up permanently. Can you see how boring it gets, though, after a while? It's kind of dull. It affects something in the emotions. It's like, oh, really? What are we going to do? Quick, let's go to the pub and get drunk. I completely can relate to that, except I don't go to the pub anymore. And even when I went, I didn't get drunk. I'm not one of those sorts of guys. I'm a bit dull, really. But that's where it's led to. We're involved in a kind of distractathon, the great distractathon, TV, movies. I mean, it's just all degenerating at a pace. And this is part of keeping people off balance, unproductive. I mean, think about this as another idea. This is actually, it's not an idea. This just shows you where the motivations of a usurious banking system have to go if it's to sustain itself. And it just takes us all in the wrong direction. After the Civil War, the so-called Civil War in America, America bounced back pretty quickly. And because of its resources in terms of manpower, even though it was a lot of them were obviously killed, huge numbers were killed. It's still the biggest loss of life, I think, in American history in any conflict. And these were strong men. These were the pioneers. These were hardy, tough, resilient men, many of them, obviously. You would have to be to live in those times and to be there at those times. America bounced back very strong. And the productive energy of the people is exactly the same with the Germans, right? You'll notice the parallels. It goes on again and again and again. They were getting themselves and did get themselves back on their feet very quickly, pretty quickly. Machinations were in play all the time. They just come to fruition at different points. Now, if you, let's suppose you're running a shoe factory today. It's a bit quaint because maybe nobody does and they're all made in China, but let's just assume that is the case. And you want to build another factory. What you're expected to do and what most people will be doing, you go to the bank, you get a loan and you put in a plan and they go, yeah, well, your first business is pretty good. So yeah, here's, I don't know, $5 million to build your next plant or whatever they cost these days. And off you go. And so you borrow money, which they create out of thin air and put interest on the top of, and you pay it back. Yippee. And you work that into your business plan. And the way you work it into your business plan is that loan plus the interest is put into the price of your shoes and boots and whatever else that you're making, and the customer pays them. So they have to borrow money, and it's lovely. It's lovely if you're the money lender. Not so good if you're the borrower. But it keeps everybody stuck at a certain level. So that's how it works today. But back in the late 1800s in the States, that wasn't working so good because it didn't need to. Because what would happen is that the owner of the shoe factory would say, I'm just going to make this up, right? I've got no examples like this, but it's just to get the principle across. There's a guy in Baltimore, for example. I've not been to Baltimore. I think it's a bit rough, isn't it? So there's a guy in Baltimore and he's running a shoe factory. He's going, great. It's going so well. He's saving up lots of money from all the profits because he's like that. Okay. And he's just got tons. And he thinks there's a big population developing in San Francisco or wherever, 3.5, 4, 5,000 miles away, however big the trek is, big distance. We need to go out there. I need to send my son out there. We need to build one out there. We could sell just as many boots. Our boots are great. I bet I could secure the leather and this, that, and the other. So it gets organized. He doesn't go to the bank, though. They weren't going to the bank. Didn't need to. Got the savings. This is a direct threat to the banks. If you don't borrow from them, they can't become the powerhouses that they have become, the manipulative, destructive powerhouses that they have become. Because their lending carries usury, carries interest upon it. And this is the transference of wealth from the hands of the industrious into the hands of the deceptive and the manipulative service industry called, so-called, banking. The idea that banking should make a profit is ludicrous. Why? Why should it make a profit? It simply needs to make enough surplus revenues to pay its staff to man, behind the desk and to give you your dollars or your pounds or your euros. I know they're not planning on doing even that right now. We're just going to actually look up your backside or something and measure something with a camera and say, oh, your credit's very bad. You can't buy any more Wheaties or whatever they're going to say, right? This is where but it's always going to go in this direction because their mindset is one of permanent acquisition at your expense, or it's become that. I mean, bankers are very fast to say, well, without us, you wouldn't have been able to develop modern civilization. It's complete horse shit. It's all been developed in spite of them. Everything that we've done has been done by subjugating them as best we could and getting them in their place. Everything has been done in spite of banking. All the disasters are caused by banking. All wars are caused by banking. All the productivity is caused by the industrious natures of good men and women coming together to try and do that. And when we're left alone, it can go through the roof, which they don't want. Because, as I said, their other clients are going blah, 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 blah. So in this example, going back to the Baltimore thing, this guy setting up his boot factory somewhere and not borrowing the money from the bank, this is a big warning sign to the banks. They don't like it. Can't we lend you some money? They want to. They want to lend money. This is what they're looking to do all the time and to keep it going. What if you don't need to borrow any? Why would you? Just think how different life would be. Credit cards, continually checking things. We've got this automated system where you can find out what's in your bank account balance. You won't even be thinking like this. Our focus would be on where the value and wealth of life actually lies, which is in the quality of family life, which is in the quality of the goods and services that we're supposed to be using, which would absolutely be in the quality of the exceptional, healthy food that we would grow naturally without the interference of agrochemical companies and so on and so forth. Every single issue that has weaponized our own civilization back to us can be directly traced to the influence of usurious money running through the system. It's like cancerous blood, leukemia of the civilization. That's what it does. And as Justin Walker was saying, we in England, that was 9 years ago, right? That was 9 years ago, I think. So, and some of those MPs he referred to, I was bumping into those in the early 2000s. They were trying to get an early day motion. 5 out of 620. 5. Think about it. If you were to say to these politicians, those promises you make that you never fulfill, because you can't fulfill, but that you pretend to us that you're going to fulfill, but we know you can't fulfill because the bank's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, you're not doing that. Those promises. How would you like to be able to make those promises and be able to fulfill them? They'd love to do it, but they get killed. So we can't really look to the political class to save us. That's my take on it. Some people might disagree and say, oh, well, Paul, you've been a bit melodramatic about this. Maybe I am. I hope I am, actually. Wouldn't it be great if you could do that? But there's not much evidence to suggest that it's true, is there? Look at what they did to JFK. These are markers that they lay down to terrify, literally, those people that would look to take that power away from them. So we can't really look, it seems to me, to our supposed leaders. I mean, they've all been placed there. They're all actors, effectively, now, towing the company line. We can't look to them to turn it around. So we have to look to ourselves. I've thought that, instead of forming a bank that operates, we need to form a bank in name only. Its purpose being to marshal this idea, to transmit it, to get it across. I'm personally interested in solutions. I can and will at times in this show cover some of the drama of the modern unfoldingness. But in the back of my mind, I often feel that I'm wasting my time doing that. First of all, it's everywhere. You can go onto gazillions of Telegram groups. I'm on hundreds of them, right? And I do graze and consume this stuff because I'm that kind of a person. I guess we all are to some degree. We want to at least get as much warning as we can, even though I don't know quite what I'm supposed to do about it these days. But I keep thinking that it's the solution we want. And no one's been able to implement it. Since 1694, when the Bank of England started, look at what happened to Germany. Germany, of course, has been suffering and enduring its cheek to run counter to the world economic system ever since 1939. Churchill, that fat bully, who didn't save anything much, right? In my view, who didn't save anything. He squandered and lost everything that had been achieved through the hard work. I know people want to say colonialism is bad. I tend to agree. I think it's not turned out to be a good deal. And most of that was driven yet again by the money power in the city of London. They were driving it. There was an empire of the city, not an empire of the British. But Churchill said that Germany's great sin was to deny the bankers the cut of the profits. I'm paraphrasing, but you'll may be familiar with it. There's a quote. Germany's great sin was to deprive the international bankers a cut of the profits. We're not allowed to thrive. If we thrive, we invalidate their entire model, and we would thrive very quickly. None of us know what it's like to live using honest money, because we don't use it. All the money we use is cretinous, dishonest, filthy garbage, and yet we're compelled to use it because everybody else is adjusted to using it also. All these schemes, pensions, national insurance we have over here, the paying of 400 different taxes. I've seen people say, well, we need income tax to run the government. Why? What does the government do with that income tax? They break the laws. They break the wishes of the very people that they say they're representing. We have a situation here now in the UK where people are arriving in this nation without the agreement of me, let alone 60 million other people, right? Most of whom don't want to talk about it because they just go away, leave me alone. I want to be at home. We can't be left alone. We've all got to be roused up if we want there to be any sort of future for us and our children. I might carry on with banking after the break. I'm saying the break. I don't know if I've got anything. Have I got something lined up for the break? Oh, yeah, I've got a silly song. I think I've got a silly song. Is it a silly song? It probably is. So many buttons here. I never know quite what I'm doing. What do you want? Mm-hmm. I'm going to put on an instrumental thing from the 60s in England. Catch a load of this for a few minutes. I'll grab a glass of water or glab a grass of water, whatever it is, and I'll be back with you after this. that. Answers on a postcard, please, too. I'll have to come up with some sort of fictional address, and I'll have to buy bags of toffees and send them out, I suppose. That was a thing called Soul Thing. How about that's what that thing was called, by Keith Mansfield. And there you go. And I'm surprising myself with some of the things I'm playing. You probably think I sit around listening to stuff like that all day long. I don't. The hardest part of putting this together, I suppose it shouldn't be too, is finding a couple of little musical things that I can put out. Last week, or after the show, we don't stream live on YouTube for probably obvious reasons, even though I'm being relatively calm with the way I'm describing things. I hope some of you will probably be aware of that. There's a reason for it. There's no need to get too rancorous that I'm focusing on the money power, because the solution, irrespective of whoever caused it, is still down to us. We've still got to solve this, if we can, right? And we must generate some kind of a conviction that we're going to do it. But just going back to YouTube, I'll go and upload the thing a day or so afterwards. I don't know why I'm doing this, really. I don't feel as though I've got any future on YouTube. It's not as if fractional reserve banking is the top of the hit parade over there, right? But, more's the pity. But, yeah, they've all passed through, which is quite good. So I'm probably going to play a song one day. They go, this isn't illegal. This is a naughty song, and you're a very, very bad person for playing it. So hopefully Keith Mansfield will get through the guard there. It obviously gets through it on Rumble. That's where we got now. I'm still going to stick on this Bradbury pound for a bit, and then we'll maybe look at some news things. And I can take calls. Maybe you don't want to call in. That's okay. Maybe you're thinking, I don't know. I don't know what to say. But, or maybe you just think, I don't know about fractional reserve banking. There's a little thing running on the screen, but I'll read it out here anyway. If you're not looking at Rumble and you're just hearing it, say, on Speak Free Radio or elsewhere. If you go to your browser and go to paulenglishlive.com/call, don't do it just yet, but maybe in half an hour to go, I'll announce it again. But paulenglishlive.com/call, it'll redirect you through to a little sort of ad hoc studio I've got set up on StreamYard. You can come in and we can have a chat about anything to do with this or any of that other stuff. But before we sort of plunge into that, or if you do, and I'll try and notice, let me just have a look now. Oh, no one there at the moment. That's okay. That's cool. It's not as if I'm short of things to say tonight, is it? Justin Walker and the Bradbury pound. Now, I am going to read most of this, actually. In fact, I am going to read it. You ready? Sit down. Put your carpet slippers on. Get out a nice mug of cocoa. This will last about 5 to 7 minutes. And we're going to cover this. And if you're finding it sort of a bit tiresome, I don't know quite how it's going, right? It's difficult to tell. I mean, if we're doing this in an audience, you can look at people's faces. And I've found whenever I've talked about money, it's a bit of a hard basket. And I think much of it's to do with the emotional baggage that we all carry about money, which is basically you've never got enough and there's always too much bills and bugger off and stop reminding me of all that kind of stuff. And that really is the condition for the vast majority of people by design. By design. Don't want you being all free and coming up with fantastic ideas like hovercrafts and things like that in your garden shed. That would be terrible. You might upset all their low-grade, crappy WEF plans, which are a joke. I mean, they're just like imbecile children. Anyway, The Bradbury to the Rescue by Justin Walker. This can be found on a website called newchartistmovement.org.uk. And it's useful stuff. He writes, if a sudden financial collapse happens today, this is either in the UK or the US, and they're talking about rolling one out, aren't they? They'll roll one out when they're good and ready, if that's what they're going to do. The Chancellor must immediately trigger an electronic version of the 1914 Treasury-issued Bradbury pound and so ensure a prosperous, debt-free and taxation-free future for us all. It sounds like some kind of wonderful vision, doesn't it? And yet, this absolutely happened in real life in England, in Britain, in 1914, at the onset of World War I. Let's go through this. It's not too long, actually, and it's excellent in terms of its simplicity and clarity. There is currently, he writes, a lot of chatter on the internet. This is still relevant to today because this was written about 10 years ago when that interview was done, I think, by political commentators and mainstream economists that another downturn in the global economy can be expected as debt levels rise into uncharted territory. Yeah, they sure do. I was listening to Jeff Rense the other day and he was talking with his guest about the US levels of debt at 32 trillion. Ooh, does it matter? It's meaningless. The idea that anybody feel obligated to even pay it back is deranged. And yet the pressure of that, the mental of the pressure of that, is what still runs through much of the system, so that people end up getting, compelled, forced to hand over their cash to pay off this totally unrepayable, bogus debt. It's a perception. Some numbers on the screen called money say that the US owes $32 trillion. No, it doesn't. Just write it all off. There you go. And in fact, we'll come to that later, but that's what biblical law is all about, which is why we have to return to it. He goes on anyway here. However, some of the more controversial outside-of-the-box financial experts, that would be me, I suppose, certainly would be Justin Walker, and hopefully it's you too, dear listeners, in due course, or even right now, instantly, because we've just got to get on with this, believe that a collapse far worse than 2008 is now imminent as the central banking globalists contrive to reset the global economy to their immediate advantage. Really? More advantage, you see. A sovereign nation drowning in debt is far more likely to be compliant to the will of global financial and corporate governance than a sovereign nation that is free from debt and therefore free from the tentacles of the very little-known Bank for International Settlements, with its central banking system that includes the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve. So the Bank of International Settlements is the central banker's bank, and it's the main control hub for how much usury you can use this year. Bank of England, Federal Reserve, this, that, and the other. It's all coordinated. Therefore, all the economic reporting about booms and busts is an artificial reporting system because it's based on the spigot of money being turned on or turned off. This is why the Wall Street crash is totally artificial occurrence, and so it's designed, put into place. Churchill didn't get stung, by the way, because his pals advised him it was all going to go down, and 3 weeks before that, whatever he had in shares were moved off. And he needed that, to buy all that champagne and cigars and remain permanently drunk during his wilderness years in the 1930s. The fat oaf. Not a fan. Probably picking up on that. Not a fan at all. Goes on. The so-called debt that the world is currently drowning in, apparently at the time, the derivatives debt bubble hanging over the world is now approaching $2 quadrillion. Quadrillion, you learn new words every day, don't you? Has been very largely arrived at by sovereign nations' governments borrowing money from the usury practicing private financial and banking sector. Money that has been created completely out of thin air as debt and which is not backed by gold or assets of any description. This is called fraud, theft, I would call it, by most normal people, and the entire debt problem is only perceived as such by people who are very ignorant of how money is actually created and by whom. And it is also the case of the British people not knowing their own history. Just as an aside, you will of course be familiar with the simple truth that every single nation in the so-called developed world, and maybe in the so-called undeveloped world, and maybe every nation apart from, say, the Eskimos, they're all in debt. Maybe the Eskimos are in debt now. I don't know. What does it cost to build an igloo? I haven't found out, really. Probably got to be cheaper than a British house. Bit cold, though. Still, they won't get done for global warming issues, would they, or anything like that? Got distracted there. Yeah, if all the countries are in debt, all of them are in debt. Every last one. Who are they in debt to? It's a simple question. Been saying it for years. Who are they in debt to? And being right about this, or knowing this, still isn't making the difference, is it? But you do need to know it to begin the journey, or to be on it. Let's carry on with this. In August 1914, at the outbreak of World War I, to avoid the imminent collapse of the private banks and the Bank of England itself, Parliament passed a bill through Parliament in 2 days, which authorised His Majesty's Treasury, not the Bank of England, which is a private company based and ensconced in the City of London district, to create, issue and control money that was debt-free and interest-free because it was based entirely on the wealth and potential of the British nation. Now, you may recall that the purchasing and bartering and transaction system that the National Socialists implemented in the 30s when they came to power was of a similar hue. It was based on the work productivity of the German workforce, and it cut out the middleman, which is what Churchill was talking about. They denied the City of London its cut And Wall Street is cut, Federal Reserve. And the entire global central banking system, it's cut. This is a parasite. It's a plundering parasite wrapped around the earth. And people are either close to it, in which case they have the most fantastic life. They get helicopters and new trousers and eat at the finest restaurants and live in a deluded world where they think that people actually respect them and think that they're competent, when in fact, after you've read a bit, you realize what complete thieves they are and that they're unchangeable. Yeah. Okay, let's carry on with this. So Germany did the same thing, you see, as 1914. The high street banks reopened, and people who had planned to withdraw their savings in gold were more than happy to accept these new treasury notes created by His Majesty's government. And there were no problems at all concerning inflation. They'd have nothing to talk about on the news. No inflation report because it doesn't happen anymore, because we've actually got proper money. So that's that. So all the economic reporting people, you're out of a job. We don't need you because it's boring. We don't want to hear it anyway. You see the implications of this? It touches everything. People have built their careers on putting Band-Aids on this system. I'm a specialist and they work for a while, and they want that permanent system broken so they can permanently come up with solutions so they have a job and keep on talking about it and lecturing us and driving us all crazy with this overly complicated crap that they have to come up with to deal with the system that's fundamentally broke. It's mad. The private banking system, it goes on, was saved from collapse. But, unfortunately, the politicians who were and still are subservient to the wishes of the City of London, and not, I am adding, to your wishes, dear listener. They're not subservient to that. They don't give a tinker's cuss about what you want. They just want you to think that they do. Hence the great democratic nonsense. The politicians went back. They were compelled back. I would have liked to have been in on some of those meetings to find out what levers were being applied to them. Yeah, what threats, what doom-laden career future they had if they didn't do this. That's what we're talking about. Gangsterism when it gets down to it. Blackmail, coercion, threats of the loss of livelihood, of status. When these people have worked hard or started off working hard to acquire these things and then it's threatened to take away, I don't know what that's like, but I can't imagine it's fun. And you can therefore possibly understand why most of them have given in to it, which is why they're not the answer. The answer is not up the food chain with the politicians. The politicians, he says, went back to borrowing debt-laden money out of thin air from the private financial sector, which resulted in the bankers being able to make a killing out of the killing on the Western Front. Now, they had to do it. They had to introduce the Bradbury because I think it's something like the liquidity supply, the amount of cash was running out. They'd spent it all on armaments, and they had nothing to service commercial stuff. It ran for about 9 months. And the note was only printed on the front side. The back was completely empty, blank piece of paper. Maybe people were doodling on it. Oh, how I love this money. They wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known. If you were a working man in England in 1914, you wouldn't have known. Right? We know it now, but they wouldn't have known that this money was really great and the other pieces of paper were really the most ungreat thing ever. They wouldn't have known that. Most people don't know it today, do they? And it also meant, it goes on, that the national debt went up unlawfully from, brace yourself, this is 1914 figures we're talking, £650 million in 1914 to 7,500 million in 1919. A tenfold increase in the national debt and a reduction of, I think it's about 1 million men, 900,000 men that were died and killed here from Britain. German losses were far higher, so were Russian. The French were very high. Ours were probably the least of them all, but it's still 1 million men out of a population of 32 million. People in total at the time. Might not have even been that. Major stuff. This is the mentality that we've got in front of us. It's not a matter that it doesn't care. It can't. It's not designed like you and me. Because we have truck with it, because it is interwoven into the legal system now, which it bored up years ago, because it's written its own financial laws, because it's changed agreements and contracts, and the things appearing in terms of the functioning of liens and distraint orders and all this other garbage that comes with modern living. It's garbage, all of it. Doesn't it make you ill? I remember when I first I got an income tax demand when I was 18. I just wanted to throw it in the bin. Who are you? Go away. I live with my mum and dad. I'm very happy. I need this money to buy beer and a guitar or whatever it was that I was buying at the time, right? Go away. Oh, no, it's to support the country. Well, sort it out. You can see that the political class don't represent, they can't. They're totally stupid or gutless or manipulated or threatened or all of the above. It's why they can't help us. I get angry with them as well, but I try to be a bit more enlightened about it and go, I'm the stupid one here for thinking that they could possibly provide the solution because they never have. Except in 1914, under the contingencies of war, when we would have certainly gone under. Actually, it's surprising that we didn't go under in 1916 because Germany had basically won the war by 1916. We were 6 weeks away from total starvation. The U-boats were wiping out the British Merchant Navy, left, right, and centre. Thereby hangs another thread, another instalment in the central bank domination of Western Christian nations. Let's carry on with this thing, because this is good. The simple truth is this. Any sovereign nation, through its treasury, can create, issue and control debt-free and interest-free money that is based entirely on the nation's wealth and creativity. Let's repeat that. Any sovereign nation, through its treasury, this is the hidden treasure of the treasury that I'm alluding to, can create, issue and control debt-free and interest-free money that is based entirely on that nation's wealth and creativity. This way, all of a nation's essential needs can be met without the requirement for a complex, you know that, and invasive taxation system, you know that, and without being dependent on the vagaries of the international money markets. Oh, no more Forex nonsense. It's so useless. And damaging and soul-destroying poverty and austerity need never happen again. Not from our perspective. A nation's security, prosperity, and indeed happiness can be secured forever by the use of this very simple, effective, and proven measure of money creation. His Majesty's Treasury call it MO, whilst money reformers call it sovereign national credit. And our elected servants, you remember our servants? They're not very good. They don't provide much good service, do they? They pay crap at it. And our elected servants in Parliament need never again go to the City of London and the private financial institutions to borrow money, nor ever again need their decision-making be affected by the machinations of the privately controlled and owned Bank for International Settlements with its global central banking system of increasing debt strangulation. Hoo-ha! Now, this tentacled demon that has ensnared through corrupting all of the political institutions in all of these Western nations is now moving towards the central bank digital currency system, which is just an extension, a more rapidly affecting disease-ridden type of money. The forms and the functions of these institutions are not necessarily bad. It comes down to who is owning them. Who owns them? And under what conditions do they issue money? So, like I was saying earlier, you know, if we're in charge of our own nation, which let's just pretend we are, we would have a treasury that was completely transparent. You would just know, because the purpose of the treasury is not to make a profit. Why would you want to make a profit? The profit doesn't lie in money. We perceive it to because the system has been designed that way. You need it now because your bills are going up. So you need to make a profit to meet that new increase in bills that's come from the gas company and the electric company over here as they try to destroy us through bill warfare, which is what's going on. When they say the price of this has gone up and the price of that's gone up, we don't know. We don't know. These are orchestrated media events. We are to be distracted and sucked into the drama 24/7, courtesy of 24/7, blah, 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 blah. And we are. I am. I have been. So the bottom line is this. Justin Walker continues to write. Last couple of paragraphs here. If a sudden economic downturn or collapse happens, then the entire part of our nation's lawful economy, that is pensions, infrastructure, industry, shareholders, and the value of our money, can be immediately underpinned and protected by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the boss, when it comes to the Treasury, right? They could do that, except I'm going to get a little tap on the shoulder from someone that don't want them to do it. That's serious tap. He does this by she does it, but we'll say he, because I'm a traditionalist. He does this by declaring that HM Treasury will now immediately resort to 100% MO. That's that type of money that is issued as non-debt, not interest-bearing. He does this by simply restoring the 1914 Bradbury pound. Now you know what we have to do, both as physical cash and as electronic money. British economy, you can do the same thing with the greenback in the States, right? We need a restoration of true money. The British economy will therefore become completely impervious to the international and privately controlled central banking system and the criminal mindset behind it. He's right. It's a criminal mindset. And all of the British people, this is like Happy Valley, but let's do it anyway. And all of the British people will enjoy the rest of their lives living in a tax-free country that enjoys continuous prosperity rather than experiencing the cutbacks and food banks of austerity. Just look at what can be done. The National Health Service will have all the money it needs. That's a bit of a worry considering the way it's been managed, but let's go with this. To provide a first-class service. The vulnerable and the elderly in our society will have all the social care they need. The armed services will have all the personnel, equipment and resources that they require to effectively defend our nation's shores and sovereignty and to look after the veterans so that they're not sleeping in doorways while migrants come here and are given houses, which is all part of the demoralization warfare being waged upon us courtesy of the ultimate perpetrator, the City of London, the central banks, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of International Settlements, and all the festering flies that gather around that huge pile of excrement. All student debts will be written off. Oh, I don't know about that. I think students deserve it, to be quite honest. No, I don't mean that, of course, because we could get back to proper students, going to proper universities as opposed to social engineering factories, which is what they've been turned into yet again by the same thing. Without delay, whilst all future education will be free at source. Not a bad list to show what can be done by simply harnessing common sense and a historical precedent that worked brilliantly. You ever heard about this? Have the BBC ever done their 10-part series, The Bradbury Pound, how it transformed things for 9 months in England, enabled us to recover the economy, and with questions in it like, why on earth do we go back to that stupid system where we're borrowing it off spivs? Spivs. Deceivers. Running them, and they have attracted to them the most incredible minds and brains. Seriously, they've done that. They give seats for economics and prizes and all this kind of stuff. And a certain mind, understandably, fine minds, have been attracted and drawn into that space. They go to the London School of Economics and they just perpetuate this system. And yet, they don't ever talk about the fundamental issue, which is that the money we use is crap. Because most people don't think you can have different types of money. I think I said it maybe a couple of weeks ago. We are furnished with a type of money that destroys the bulk of what we create. You might want to forgive yourself if you feel a bit down in the mouth from time to time, or why you don't have any money, or why others around you don't, or why the rich and the wealthy won't give it to us, because they're sucked into this system that's drawing the money to the center all the time. It's drawing it all the time, without which this banking class that has evolved, this hybrid of all these different sorts of groups down through the ages, couldn't exist. They couldn't exist without sucking your lifeblood in the form of money out of you. We have to smash this. We have to find the antidote. Well, we found it. What we haven't found is a successful way to permanently implement it. It seems to me that education, probably in a more shorthand version than this, memes, little posters, this, that, and the other. I think I've said to people, how do you like to live in England and not pay any more income tax? It can't be done. Of course it can. Of course it can. 400 taxes. 400 taxes in the UK. Maybe you've got even more in America because you do things bigger and better, don't you? You've probably got loads. Cat tax, foot tax. I'm making these things up, right? Car tax, spoon tax. They'll just come up with any tax they like. What's the one that they're looking at right now? Oh, yeah, if you're, this is a type of tax, even though it's not called a tax. If your house is environmentally inefficient, if you're leaking heat out, you evil house-dwelling vermin, if you're doing that, there's a possibility they might take your house off you. Because if they can do that, it means it was never yours, right? And of course, I think if you look at the law, they don't allow this stuff. This manipulation of the language of legal documents is also concomitant to the control by central banks. One of the first things they did was to begin to pervert the courts and to take it over. Last paragraph from him for now. It says this: but the only way all this will be allowed to happen is if people send this article to everyone they know. It's a start. There are other ways, but he's right. It's only our collective ignorance, good word, I'll come back to that in a second, that allows the present criminal, usury-based and debt-creating money system to prevail. The bankers and financiers are scared stiff that this simple and proven solution will soon become common knowledge. So it's up to you. Please help to make this go viral. And then it refers to a book by a gentleman who I'm hoping to speak to soon, because I've got a colleague who's met him and knows him, called John Briggs, called Alice and the Money Tree. Would make an excellent gift to help inform and wake up friends, family and colleagues. The challenge before us is a communications challenge. It's a communications challenge. How do we get this across? How do we drive this point home into the hearts and minds of our kith and kin, good people, maybe not the most intellectually gifted people in the world, but with hearts that are good, that have worked hard, that just want to look after their families? How do we get that across to them? We have to. We have to find a way of in my view, we have to find a way of binding together. I mean, as I said, I could make this show, and I won't be able to go into it so exhaustively every week. Maybe I will, actually. You don't know. Maybe just get driven mad. Is he still banging on about that stuff? Until it's changed, maybe that's what I've got to do. Maybe it's what you've got to do. We have to find probably a more playful way. We'll go barking mad. No wonder people, slope off to the bar after a while, just going, what do we do? Well, we need numbers, it seems to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I wouldn't go into politics personally because that arena's gone. It just says that it can solve things. Nah. Look what they did to Enoch Powell, the last decent man that we had in British politics 50 years ago, 60 years ago. All of the things that are talked about in economic effects are playing within this economic system, which is nuts. From our perspective, it's a direct threat. It's money as weapons of war, waged against us 24/7, with an entire culture that has developed around it that you and I are part of, so that our language is imbued with all this nonsense, and it takes a long time to sort of step out of it and see it for what it is. I've thought for a long time that, the purpose of life is not to actually make the economy good, but it's become that, hasn't it? It has become that. It has become such a thing that if we do not pay attention, I'm having to do it right now personally, thinking, what am I going to do next year? You having similar things happening to you? It's only when you feel it, when it's actually bearing down upon you, that you get the kind of sense of distress that so many other people have had to and are going through right now. It's an outrage. They say we can't afford this. We can afford anything we want. But we have been stripped of the ability to have a say in our own affairs, and we have to get that back. We're not going to get it back through politics, in my view. Not at this moment in time. That's unlikely to happen. Thoughts to throw out of you, because I'm looking for all sorts of anybody that's got input. I'm just saying it as I know it today. There are other people who may have much more constructive forms for going through, and I'm going to listen. I'll put my shoulder with anybody that's pushing in the right direction. We've got to take that up. We're going to have to work together if we want to survive and thrive, because we are undergoing war. It's war. It's stepped up. It's being waged upon us. Oh, it's a bit dramatic. No, it's true. It is true. I was saying to someone the other day about, obviously here I am, a Brit. And if you're a Brit, that means you're either Welsh, Irish, Scottish, or English. And I was looking at it, I thought, WISE, wise. I'm like this. I'm always mucking about with acronyms and stuff, right? Oh, we're the wise people. There's actually a lot of evidence to suggest that that's not true right now. It's not that we're not imbued with some of it from time to time, but you could say that the management of this nation, its integrity, is a sick, demoralizing joke being played upon us by the central banking money power. The money power are extracting the urine from us. They love it. It's what they thrive on. And we have to look at all these ways in which that's going to stop. So just let me throw out an idea for you. We need a communications platform that's about the Bradbury, for example. It doesn't have to be the Bradbury. We've got it as an example. You can call it whatever you want. And I quite liked, we could form the Bank of Bradbury, B-O-B, and then we call it Bob. And we need T-shirts and stuff. And you've got it animated about it. And we need simple pictures. And we say, look, forget all that politics stuff and all this other stuff. Let's sort this really boring thing out called the bank, because it turns out that since 1694, our lives have just been turned to ruin because of it. The competence of our people, left unmolested and unfettered, just like with the Germans, is astonishing. I'm impressed with us. We are told to not be impressed with us. Well, I refuse to go along with that. I refuse to go along with it. We have a lot of people currently residing in these islands that should not be residing here. It's like a real estate problem. What's that mantra of real estate agents, what they call realtors in America? People that, the agent that's going to find your house or sell it, those people. They have a phrase over here which is location, location, location. We have a lot of people on the earth that are in the wrong location. It's not even their fault. What's happened to this country since 1945 with the importation of people who should not be living here? Visit? Fine. Live? Don't work. It's like putting two different types of music in different keys in the same room and getting them both to play at the same time. When you mix races, living, which is a permanent residing event, side by side, it never works. There's not one historical record of it ever working, because nature says, I'm in charge. I'm in charge, and pressures will build up in you that you can't see right now, but I've warned you and I'm telling you, and if you look at this and study this, you'll see it's not going to work, and you don't need to do it, and it's a nonsense idea. And so if I talk like this, which I am doing right now, and I'm a white Englishman, I am, of course, now a racist. Race, I suspect, is probably, of all the four-letter Anglo-Saxon swear words, is now considered to be the most evil. It's the one you shouldn't say in polite company. Actually, no one's in any company, polite or impolite these days, it seems to me, or very little company, you know? So, Cat 7 writes, CBDC is like a final step to enslavement. Anything opposing can be switched off. Correct. Micro-regulation of all the things that that matter to you in life. Now, we got to get organized. This sounds so wet when I say that. Well, what are we going to do? Comes up for me as well, because we're facing a challenge that previous generations didn't face. If we go back, say, let's go back a long time, but it's useful just to show you how different we are as people. If we go back 600 or 700 years, 1362, I think it is, in England, there was a thing called the Peasants' Revolt, led by a gentleman called Wat Tyler. I referenced it in a previous show. We need T-shirts that basically say we're all Wat Tyler now, because we are. We need to become Wat Tyler. Tyler opposed what was being done to the peasants. He was one. And they fought against the power structure of the day. They rocked it to its core. I'm paraphrasing that from a guy who wrote a thing called The Red Dagger, Heathcote Williams. I'll cover that. It's a long form poem. It's quite excellent and wonderful. This attitude by those in power toward those without the power has not changed at all in hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's what word do we use? It seems to be unchanging. Tyler, along with a gentleman, the mendicant priest called John Ball, and others, including a woman called Joanna Farrar, who rode on horseback and killed tax collectors with her bow and arrow. There's a heroine for you, women. They all came to grief, of course. They were all hung, drawn, and quartered. Actually, Ball was, probably Farrar was, I think, and Tyler was killed by the Mayor of London in real life, stabbed in the back whilst talking to the king. The mayor thought that Tyler's tone was insolent toward the king. This is very important. To hell with the livelihood of the peasants, eh? You can't talk to the king like that. Yes, you can. You can when they're out of order. And our leadership class has been out of order for a long, long time. So we're going to have to understand the nature of power and how to gather it. There was a woman, over here. She didn't ride around on horseback killing tax collectors in the 1960s. That'd have been a story, wouldn't it? In fact, yeah, it's a bit worrying thinking about it now. Called Mary Whitehouse. Some of you may be long enough in the tooth to know of this event or her. She formed a thing called the moral majority, and she stood against the spread and proliferation of pornography. And she was treated, I remember as a teenager, she was deemed to be sort of fuddy-duddy because this was all the end of the swinging 60s and the wanton 70s or whatever it's called. And so she was, viewed really with disdain and mocked. But she had a lot of people on her side, and she was right about everything. The proliferation of pornography is another aspect of this central banking subjugation of our civilization. That's what it is. It's the greatest power, and it's in the hands of people that don't care for us too much. How mad is that? We're allowing it to go on, although that's an unfair statement, but, I will do that from time to time, because most people are ignorant of it. And that word ignorance is very good as well. It's very useful. It's the root of ignorance is ignore, is it not? So maybe the better pronunciation is ignorance. Ignorance is the condition of a person that's ignoring something. And when you look at what ignoring it, I think it's something like this. You're kind of aware of a thing that's going on. You're aware of it. You choose to not pay further attention to it. You choose to ignore it. You choose to not look at it. You choose to not examine it more fully. You choose to dismiss it as a threat. You choose to put it away, put it out of mind, not get involved with it. You ignore it. This central banking evil, well, it should never have been ignored in the first place. We'll go back. I'm going to hop up and down the timeline here because I'm sort of finding it's a thing that I just got completely wrapped up in, because right now, to this very moment, we have to understand two things. Very, very powerful men have done this and fought back against it for short periods of time. And it's been spectacular what they've achieved, but they weren't able to sustain it. Germany got bombed into obliteration because of it. There are other factors at play. I'm fully aware of that. But if you're the central banking thing, you can't have people going to Germany in 1930 and finding out what they've done to get 6 million men back to work and discover that what they've basically done is cut the bankers out, as Churchill said. That's the fundamentals of it. Yes, there was a lot of investment coming in from America, from Henry Ford, and from other extremely ironic investors in many ways. I won't go into it today. People wanted to make money more than they cared about their principles. And I guess in a system that's based on fractional reserve banking and usury, that's kind of, aren't we all drawn to that? I've been drawn to it throughout my life. I thought, one of my thoughts for even getting involved with the thing that brought me to such ruin, is a bit heavy, but it really was a major problem, is I wanted to get on. I wanted to be able to provide for my soon-to-be wife. And I found life the most inordinate struggle because of knowing this stuff. So it's not very appealing. Oh, you're asking me to come outside of the established system that everybody's, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. You're asking me to enter into a life of struggle. Yep, that's it. It won't be easy. No, it will not. Is anybody else doing it? Some. Amazingly courageous people. At times I don't necessarily rate myself as that. I'm just bugged by it. Are you not bugged by it? You should be. If you're not bugged by it, there's something wrong with you. How are you supposed to really plan for a future for your children and grandchildren? People are talking now. I don't want any children. I don't want any grandchildren. This world's so bad. It's bad because the central banks run it. Oh, let me put it this way. There'll still be badness left if we get rid of them or transform it. But at least we'll know what it is. At least we'll be able to clearly see the nature of the badness. We'll see it rapidly, and we'll be able to tidy up these other areas which we're currently unaware of quite quickly when the usury fog is lifted, when it's removed from proceedings. I mean, what's the Chancellor going to, under a system like this, what would the Chancellor say at the budget? I've written it all down. There's not much to say. I'm going to the pub. Everything's fine, just like it was last year. There's no inflation or anything. You've got no taxes to pay. Everything's sorted. We're having a great time. Education's going through the roof. Look at the quality of our culture and our buildings. This is what I want to hear, you see. You're hearing my stuff. We've taken the Shard down. We ripped it up and we've melted all that stuff down and turned it into Portaloo toilets because it's all it was fit for. We've done the same with the Gherkin. All this modern architecture and the brutalism since 1945, we've taken all that down. They've all been turned into potties because that's all they're really fit for. We're putting up the most fantastic buildings with arches and domes. We're breathing life back into art and culture. We want you to feel all of this beauty that we can create. Oh, and we're not in debt to anybody, and our military are strong to defend it because we understand some people are not as far down the road as we are, and they may covet this. We want to help them on certain terms, but they can't come and live here because that doesn't work, but they can come and visit and learn and train and do all these things. There's such a different story that we could tell and could be telling, but we're not telling it right now because the people in charge of the narrative systems are beholden to the sweets and goodies that come to them from the central banking nonsense. How about that? Oh, we've only got a few minutes. How long have we got to go? About 10 minutes. I was going to play another song, but it's probably a bit silly. I'm probably better just keep talking a bit. Look, if you want to call in, even during these last 10 minutes, you might not want to. Let me go and have a look. Maybe somebody has, and I've just been blabbing so much I've not even noticed. No, not really. If you feel like calling in, you want to have a word. Oops, I better add myself in there. Go to paulenglishlive.com/call. I'm happy talking by myself, don't worry. But if you get the urge to call or ask anything, that's cool. I've been looking at, haven't been looking at Odyssey. I don't know what to do about that, really. Am I supposed to? I saw somebody's got a way of looking at multiple sort of messaging boards all at the same time, but I'm not too clever with that stuff just yet. I'm clever with other things, technically, not this. Oh, I know what I was going to mention. Something else. In terms of organizing and communications and stuff. I was listening to a chap the other day. I was Ernest Hancock. I always want to call him Ernest Shackleton for some reason. I don't know why I want to do that. It's a bit silly. If you want to call him, paulenglishlive.com/call. Nobody does. That's all right. Talking to a chap called Jason. Don't know who he was, but talking to a chap called Jason about a piece of software called Quartal, Quartal, which is the internet reimagined for us, owned by the people. Now, I was around in the early days of the internet. As I mentioned before, like 92, 91, I had an email address. And then we got the World Wide Web a few years later. It was basically email and news groups. Fantastic, really. Unbelievable. What an Aladdin's cave of stuff. And there was, right at the beginning, this sounds like an old lag story. I mean, to me, it's like yesterday, this stuff. There's something about digital. It seems to sort of stop time happening because nothing frays in the digital universe like old books. You get the sense it's all just been made, I guess. Although those wonderful HTML websites in the 90s are still things of great beauty, the labyrinthine links everywhere. I quite like them still. All the design stuff from those early days, no one gave a monkeys because it was just so exciting to get this stuff up. Something has been kind of lost, you will have noticed. Yet again, the companies that now dominate the internet do so courtesy of the banks, courtesy of the CIA, and their placemen. Like Musk, like Gates, Not like Jobs, I think. Jobs was done in because he wasn't playing the game. I don't know. I'm just saying, making that up as a feeling. I can't prove it, right? But it's what it feels like. And because I remember using an operating system by Steve Jobs after he first left Apple called Next. It was amazing for the time, called Next Step. Brilliant bit of kit. And we had that running in this place where I bumped into this guy that taught me about the banking stuff. These nearly 30 years ago, 1994, it started. So Jobs, I don't think, was involved with it. But these characters that they use and within the computer field have come to dominate it. You know, Arsebook, Facebook, whatever you want to call it. I've never used it. It's silly. I think social networking is daft, frankly. The things I've always enjoyed the most and where the most meaning is when you're using email with people that you actually know in real life to cover things and to share research together. It's quite brilliant, actually. Small clusters of people doing things like that. I, to some degree, have also got hoovered into that mindset of numbers. And there are possibly platforms where there are huge numbers to be found. Gab is very interesting. 20 million unique visitors a month, I understand right now, according to their figures. I've no reason to doubt them. I think Andrew Torber, who runs Gab, is a straight-up guy. He understands Christian law, and that's going to root through into honorable just weights and measures for banking. Isn't that what we're talking about with the Treasury? Just weights and measures. Non-interest-bearing, non-debt-bearing tokens to basically service commercial exchanges between us. And, you know, once it's in place, we'd stop talking about money. You wouldn't even really need a business press to the degree, because all they're talking about is the mayhem that is a result of this stupid, but it's not, is it? This cunning money is the right word, which not one man in a million, according to J.M. Keynes, the noted economist. Not one man in a million, he said, would understand it. So if you're understanding it, you're that man in a million. Well done. I think it's probably going to be a bit more than that these days. I think we're going to have a bit more than a man in a million understanding it. So let me just have a scout around here as well. You know what? Of the 4 shows that I've done so far, this is the first time I've felt as though I've got an idea where we're going with all of this. I'm going to introduce other themes as well, like I said, and it's settled down over the first few shows, but, yes, well, it's true. You're absolutely, I'm just looking at a comment here, which I'm not going to read, from Warren App Arthur 503 to 57. What a username that is. The root cause of all of our problems is, you know who. Yeah. I think it's expanded a bit beyond that, or at least let me say that. The truth is, I don't know. But we don't need to actually, what we can look at is what can we do? Can we do something to stop it? Now, if we're going back to what we perceive are the centers of power and asking permission, hey, you guys that own the Bank of England, will you stop that? Stop it. Stop it. We don't want that. We want this sort of money. Can we have Bradbury pounds now, please? Thanks. Yeah, thank you. That would be really, really good. And shut most of these think tanks down about calculating inflation, all that kind of stuff. It's all going to disappear. We don't need any of that anymore. They're not going to go for it. They've got jobs. Their lives are invested in this stuff. There's an entire culture of it. They're on a train track. It's a daft track. It's going into an abyss, but they're on it. At least they're a gardener. They've got a position of power on it. They're not going to leave that. Here in England, we have a thing called parishes. Where are we time-wise? We've got a couple of minutes to go. We have these things on the ground called parishes. Perish the parish. And there's about, as I said, 11,000. They're ancient things. They were the footprints. Each one would have an assembly point. These became, in due course, churches and so on and so forth. And if churches were really doing their job of keeping the law of God in play, then these sorts of banking systems wouldn't be there. But they have endured deceptions and subterfuge just like everything else. The Catholic Church fell in 1962. Not that I'm partial to it, because I think it's in error on so many other ways, but who am I to argue with history? The fact is that if you and I had been alive in England in the 1300s, we would have been Catholics, I guess. And we might have been very happy until we met Wat Tyler and then realized how unhappy we were and cracked on with it to get it sorted out, you know. So the parishes and a people's parish network maybe needs to be established. We have these things already existing in England called parish councils. We've also got counties, about 50 in the States. There's about 3,000, is there? 3,500 counties. I don't know how many there are in Australia. I'm concerning my thoughts with those countries that were the recipient of common law, which is the good side of the law, although that's been attacked steadily in England since the arrival of the Normans with William in 1066. I'm only talking about this stuff not because we want to know the dates and everything, but to show this line of control that's built up long in the tooth. It's even longer than that. As I said, it goes all the way back to Babylon, about 600 or 700 BC. So it's quite a way out. But we'll address these topics. I think I'm going to try and address them more fully in the future. You give it some thought. You want to call in with suggestions about what we have to do. It may be not so appealing. Maybe I should just do the drama of the news. Russell Brand's on Rumble and Rumble are being attacked and free speech this and free. I'm all for free speech. But they get paid every week and we don't. Think about that. We're trying to support one another as best we can. It's a real fight. They get paid every week for talking manure, keeping the system stuck, and making up these bogus, false dramas. All this kind of stuff, So that's what we've got to deal with. We've got to do something that no other generation has ever done. And we might have to do it internationally. That is, the nations of Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, of the British nations, of the nations of Western and Northern Europe, Canada and the United States. The people I'm talking about, us, the ones that do most of the living and dying around here and have done all the time. We need to look at some way to connect, I feel. And to try and have fun as we go along and do it. Okay, there's the wind-out music. Thanks very much for being with me this week. There'll be more of it next week. And as I said, I'm also planning to maybe add another show once we can get the numbers up and get a bit more calling going. And I'll get some guests on. I've got people lined up, and it will be really around this topic. Thanks for listening. God bless you all. Have a cracking week. And I'll see you back here again next Thursday.